Hello, this is Ceci Sparrow with The Frontline, and I'm here with my good friend Dale Favors. How you doing, Dale?
Doing well. Doing well. Thank you for having me on.
It's good to see you. It's been forever.
Yes, it has.
Since we've met. So, Dale, why don't you start telling me about yourself, your origins? Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and I was born to both my mother and father had been high school and probably dated a little bit in middle school as well, and a little bit in college. And they were both 20 when they had me. My parents were not married. They never did marry, but I had the opportunity to have both my parents in my life throughout my whole life, very involved, very engaged in my development. I was just listening to someone else today talk about how they had the best of their grandparents and so on and so forth. I would tell you I had the best of that. I was the first grandchild on my mother's side. So my mother's the second oldest out of 5. So I was the first grandchild, and I had an investment from everyone into who I became, right? So all of my mother's brothers and sisters, my grandmother, and others just poured into me. So I had that. And then on my father's side, I was the second grandchild. My cousin Deidre is the oldest. But I had my father, who was one of 4, and his siblings. I had my grandmother on that side. So I had a very robust engagement with family, and family has always been very important.
That's good. That's good to know. So what led you to attend an HBCU?
Well, I told you, both my parents, they actually were college educated, and they went to Central State University right there in Ohio, in Wilberforce, Ohio. So I grew up knowing this experience, this Black college experience, and my aunts and uncles went there as well. And I was able to really see that vision of that love for that alumni love, I guess you could say, as well as going to those games, football games and basketball games as a youth and growing up. And I knew that Black college experience was special. And then something unique happened where when my grandmother got all her kids through school, those who decided to stay all the way through, which I think everyone finished college except for, I think, my uncle, my oldest uncle. He may not have finished, but everyone else did. She got everybody right. She's like, okay, now I'm going to go back to school. And then she finished high school, and then she went to college. So probably I'm 5 or 6 years old, somewhere in that range. There was a big story done in a local magazine in Ohio called Right On. I think it was Right On. No, I'm sorry, scratch that. It was Pride magazine. And she was featured in there because this woman had put all her kids through college, and then she goes off to finish high school and then completes college. And so I was at her college graduation as a young person, and we have that picture as well. Ironically, one of her sons, my uncle, my youngest uncle, was a professor at the college by that time. Wow. So that was probably, I'm going to say that may have been in the early 70s. That was probably 74, 75, somewhere. It may have been 76, but it was a special day, and I remember that totally. So I always knew, A, college was important, but B, that Black college experience. And she also graduated from Central State, which is where they went to school. So I knew that Black college experience was special, and I wanted to experience that. So that's what really drove it. I saw my parents. I was able to partake as a young person and watch all this love for the college and that school spirit that they had, and many of their friends went there. And the realization there was that this Black college wasn't only an experience, but it was an opportunity. And the Black college really was what gave many an opportunity to go to college that may not have had another option. And so I had options, but I wanted that experience. And so I had a unique situation where there were a few of us who all went to high school together, because by this time my mother moved me from this inner city of Dayton, Ohio, out to Yellow Springs, Ohio, which was even closer to Wilberforce, right? And it was there that it was a group of us Black students in this very diverse school environment, where we all kind of said we want to go to Black colleges. So from Tennessee State to Howard to Morehouse to Hampton, and then myself at Florida A&M, we all decided to go. I thought that was special because coming out of that school, that was probably a very unique situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Black college experience I knew was special, and I knew I wanted a piece of that, and we went and got it, and it was definitely that.
That's awesome. That's an incredible story. There's not very many people that can say that. I mean, just the whole fact that your grandmother put her kids through college, then she went back to finish high school, finish high school and then university on top of that. And then here you are, next generation, and you get to go and decide that you want that same HBCU experience for yourself.
Yeah.
And then your friends do also. Yeah.
And it was good. And all of us finished at, I think one or two may have ended up transferring out of an HBCU to another school, but maybe it's only one actually. But it was such a growth experience, and the love, you felt it when you got to campus, and it was all yours. And I try to explain to people, and there's people at times who are like, why did you decide to go to a Black college? Why not? It's hard to explain that to people if they don't understand. It's as we used to say, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Better ask somebody, or you just got to know. And what it was that feeling of everything on this campus is yours. You're not worrying about who's coming for homecoming, because it's going to be somebody that you enjoy.
Right.
You're not worried about what music the band is playing at halftime, because it's going to be something you recognize and something you've been listening to. And that band is going to entertain you, and it's going to be an experience. And alumni are coming back. People have been coming back to go to homecoming for years, going to be there, and all that stuff is what's special. And not saying that it didn't happen at other schools, but at the Black college, it's a special thing. And I even sold that to my kids, and my oldest son, who is in college, he's a freshman at Morehouse. And we looked at plenty of schools, and he got into every school he applied. But I said, listen, son, you can go to school wherever you want, but I'm going to tell you, the experience you'll have at an HBCU is going to be an experience that you will never forget. And you'll always have another opportunity, if you choose to go to graduate school, to go wherever you want. And but that period of time when you're 18 to 22 to 21 to 22 are those formative years where you'll need guidance, because you're away from home, and you'll need people to grab you and tell you when you're wrong in a way that's firm, but also with love. And that's what you get. Not saying you can't get any place else, but you're definitely going to get it there. It's home. It's no question.
I didn't have that experience. I wish I would have went to a HBCU. I went someplace totally different. Yeah. But I wish I would have had it, because when I talk to people like you that had the experience, and they explain the same thing, how in those formative years when you're first leaving home, how you're actually in an environment that nurtures you.
Absolutely.
They hold you. And they kind of keep you in a way in which, you feel protected. Okay, right. So I'm going to backtrack a tiny bit, because I'm a total sucker for stories about grandmothers. Mm-hmm. I want you to retell the story about meeting was it your grandmother's grandmother?
So my great-great-grandmother, I had the opportunity. So first of all, I'll say, I told you my mother was 20 when she had me. My parents were 20. And matter of fact, my mother just had her birthday, February 10th. And my mother is my biggest cheerleader, but beside her was my other biggest cheerleader, who's no longer with us, but with my grandmother Dorothy, that was her mother, and they raised me. And my grandmother was mama for many years for me, because that was everybody else's mama in the house. So I was like, oh, it must be mama.
That's her name. Her name is Mama.
That's exactly who that was. And so she really did a lot for me. But as I was talking to you before, she had her mother, which I didn't get a chance to meet. That was her mother's name was Lily Mary. And then we had her grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. I only know as Big Mama. I had the opportunity to meet her. She died when she was like 100, 101, something like that. But I remember being a young kid. She lived in Cleveland at this time. She was a mix of African American and Native American. And I remember we would always go up to Cleveland, which is where the rest of the family was outside of Dayton, and get a chance to see her. So I remember that totally. And I remember when she died, I remember us driving up to Cleveland to go to the funeral. But it's an American story. And I would tell people, if you have the opportunity to read a book, and it's a book that I love so, because I could hear what I'll come back to what I did with my grandmother, but it's a story. It's called Warmth of Other Suns.
Yes.
Suns, S-U-N. And the book was just, wow. It was telling of the story of the Great Migration, the movement of former slaves and post-slavery African Americans and their movement north for better wages, better conditions, living conditions, and better opportunity. And my family was of that. So I told you of the movement, migration of my father's parents from Alabama and my mother's parents who had come from Georgia and come to the north for better opportunity. And I remember having many conversations with my grandmother, and I have it taped on a video. I had a video camera, and I remember taping her. She told me the story of coming to Ohio and being in a car and in the trundle seat and all this stuff that I didn't know much about, and living in they said the home was a shotgun home, where you walk in the front door and you see everything all the way to the back. and how the homes she lived in, the first few homes she lived in, they didn't have internal running water and toilets, right? They had an outhouse. Yep. So I remember all those stories, and you get a sense of what life was like for the African American in this country during that time. So you got to think slavery, post-slavery, and the existence of just trying to stay alive in the South. You come north, you have better opportunity, but it's not much different, because it's not like you could choose to live where you wanted to live, and it wasn't like you were getting paid the top wage that you should be getting paid, and you had no education. So it's all these things compiled. And so your kids are going to school. Like I remember my grandmother going to school, and I was always curious, why did she go back to school after that? The whole point was, and you get it, you understand, even when they went to school, there was no, like my kids can go to high school knowing that there's a guarantee if they go to college that they have the opportunity for a better life.
Right.
So there was no guarantee you could afford to go to college when my grandmother was finishing high school. And B, there was definitely no guarantee that even if you did go, that life was going to be any better. So, the incentive was different. And so that brings, it sometimes has me thinking about today in the youth today. And you ask questions like, why do guys stand on the street in front of the corner store and just hang out? And not saying that there's excuses, not saying that that's the case at all, but, and then make choices that they make. And you think about, if you're in a certain environment and the options are limited, then what is your incentive of chasing something that seems like a pipe dream?
Yeah.
Because you need something to change today. You can't wait 8 years for that to change. You need it to change today. Yeah. And so do you make a decision that could be a life-changing decision in order for a potential better option today? Or are you willing to take that risk? Because the option of waiting 8 years, right, deferred gratification, you may not have 8 years that you're gonna live. Ain't no guarantee you're gonna live to tomorrow. So you're like, why not take this shot? And so you get it. If you understand that, you get it. Where someone else will be like, why is this guy doing whatever he's doing, selling drugs? What? Doesn't make any sense. He's a smart guy. He could just go to school. Okay. So he goes to school. And what? Right?
Right.
And so bringing that back to my grandmother, that was her thing was, okay, I just went to work. Because we didn't have the money for college. That wasn't going to happen. She was one of 4. And college wasn't like the thing you went and did then. Not that you couldn't go, and not that there weren't people going. It's just go work, get you some money so you can get out of this shotgun house, right? With your father, who probably is, I think her father was a drunk, or let me say he was an alcoholic. I didn't say he was a drunk, he was an alcoholic. And boom, that's what it was. So try to figure out life. And so, these are things that go on, but that's history. And so, she gets married to a gentleman who had gone to the military, was in World War II, comes out. The GI Bill is there, and I think the GI Bill was interesting. I don't know if it was a little bit more limited to Black people, but what it did was it created the opportunity for some people of color who had been in the military to acquire homes. Mm-hmm. And so now you have these Black neighborhoods that are popping up, and they're homeowners. And so my parents, both of my parents, but my mom grew up in a home in which her parents owned. And they had 5 kids. And so, that's the history. I hope that's interesting. I don't want to bore you.
No, you're not boring me. Not at all.
But that's my grandmother. She was my grandmother, and my actual grandfather, my mother's father, and so my paternal grandfather. They were divorced. And then later on, my grandmother remarried. Again, I was young, but I remember and my grandfather, as I called him, because he was her second husband, was my grandfather's grandfather I knew. Mm-hmm. And Nelson was my man. And so my grandmother and grandfather raised me along with my mother. But I remember going to the grocery store on Saturday. Was grocery store day. We'd go to this was our day. We get up, watch some cartoons. They would get ready. We would go to the grocery store on Saturday. And then right next to the grocery store was this place called Ponderosa, and that's where we do lunch.
Oh.
We go to the Ponderosa. I get a nice little hamburger or a mini steak. And the big thing then, because it was just coming out, was the salad bar.
Oh my God, there's so many memories.
Oh, you remember that?
I remember when the salad bar was thing, and then it was the buffet.
Yeah. So that was my Saturday with growing up with my grandparents, and my mother and I for many years lived with my grandma and Nelson, and so that's who I grew up with. And I remember still to this day when Nelson. He had a bad heart, and I don't know how old I was then. I may have been 10 or 11 or so. And I remember we had gone to Kings Island, which was the amusement park. Came back, stopped by my grandmother's house, and that's when they told me that Nelson had passed away, because he had been in the hospital a little bit. He had passed away, but I remember that totally because that was my guy. That was my guy. Yeah. But then, you know what? My grandmother was, like I said, was one of my biggest cheerleaders, along with my mom. And she told me I could do just about anything. So I believed it because she told me. And so having her see me through different stages of life, she saw me graduate high school. She was there with me when I graduated college. She got a chance to see me in my first home when I bought my home. Right? She saw me get married. Saw me have my first son. And the same week that my second son was born, back in 2005, was the week she passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So that was, I remember going back for that. But, you know, having her see me through all those stages of life was extremely important to me.
Yeah.
Because that was, I always tell people, there were people who put the chips down and said, okay, if I'm betting on something, I'm betting on this kid right here. And they both put the chips on me. Yeah. And that was, it was a good bet. It was a good bet.
You delivered.
Yeah. I delivered. But, you know, the whole piece was, it was that those whispers in my ear, like, look, I need you to deliver. In some way or fashion or another. They were like, listen, you can do this. You can do whatever you want. You can be this president if you want. And so all that whispering in my ear had me believing I can do whatever I want. And I knew that I had two people, definitely, and my father as well, but I had two people who had put all the chips. Like, this is the guy. And so I wanted to deliver for them. And being able to do that, and having them see that has always been a big win for me. Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you so much for sharing stories with me and with the front line.
Yes, I hope it was good.
Yeah, it was definitely good. It was a joy having this time with you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.